partners as it relates to UID and changing the ecosystem. Samantha joined us from Oracle Data Cloud, where she led strategy and business development there. But really, I just want to introduce her by telling you about a conversation that she and I had about a year and a half ago, which was we were talking about UID and the potential for it to just change the entire internet. And I remember both of us starting to feel overwhelmed and daunted by the significance of how big the internet is, and especially the open internet, and just how many different players there are. And just how much change it represents to have a currency making it possible to move from opt-out to opt-in, as well as to just make the internet replace this prehistoric technology of cookies. And our fears transitioned in the course of the conversation to, what if it works? What if we do it? What if we change it? And when we really started to think about, well, you don't really have to change that many people or that many companies. You don't have to win over that many hearts and minds to create momentum behind all of this. You fast forward to today, and some of those logos that I put on my slides saying that underscore how the infrastructure of the internet has changed. I don't think that there's a person that deserves more credit for that change in the world than Samantha Jacobson. So I'm super excited to introduce you to our Chief Strategy Officer, Samantha Jacobson.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to be here with you guys today. One of my favorite parts of my job is that I get to think about which bets we want to place for the future and not just focus on this quarter. And so with that lens, I'm really excited to take some time today to talk to you guys about identity, about the data marketplace that Jeff and Dave talked a little bit about, and about shopper marketing. But I wanted to start, assuming my slides catch up, so I wanted to start by sharing a reflection I had. So I came home last week and I was exhausted. And my 6-year-old immediately asked to play Candy Crush on my phone. If any of you guys have kids, I just did not have it in me. I was like, here you go. What am I going to make for dinner? And my version of making dinner is ordering in because I am not a cook. So we decided to order Papa John's, and then we're watching SpongeBob SquarePants on Hulu. As you can imagine, I did not get much of a vote in what we chose to watch. But when I was reflecting on that experience, something that I found really interesting is that in each of those instances, we were using a device connected to the internet, right? My son's on my phone, I'm using my computer to order dinner, and we're watching TV via Hulu, and yet none of them had a cookie on me. So why would we think about cookies as a consumer's sense of identity? And that didn't even take into consideration the fact that I was listening to Spotify on my drive home, or the fact that I was going to go binge watch Below Deck as soon as I put the kids to bed. All of those are points of interaction, and yet none of them had a cookie. But you know what they all did have? They all had my email address. I logged into Candy Crush using my email address. I ordered pizza on Papa John's website using my email address. I logged into Hulu using my email address. My email address was always present. And what we find is that consumers expect to receive tailored advertising in exchange for free or reduced content. So it is critical that marketers can understand the whole consumer and not just cookies. Dave Pickles was on this stage 5 years ago in 2017, and he talked a lot about the fact that cookies are an outdated technology. That has never been more true than it is today. Safari and Firefox already block cookies. CTV doesn't support it at all. And so when we think about identity, we need to make sure that we have a sense of identifiers that truly are present wherever the consumers are consuming media. What would that look like? I'm so glad you guys asked. UID 2.0 is really centered around this sense of identity, right? Whether it's keyed off of a consumer phone number or email. And it was built with the concept of consumer privacy, trust, and transparency at the epicenter. Jeff talked a little bit about the fact that it's a distributed technology, but I think that is so core to its success because UID2 can be used by anybody in any ecosystem as long as they're adhering to those principles. And so it's the fact that it's open source, that you can access that code, and that everyone is able to use it to support their business that I believe will make it so successful. So if you ask me what a UID2 token is, I would tell you it is a hashed, salted, encrypted ID. And if you are anything like my husband, he looks at me like I have 3 heads when I say something like that. He has no clue what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to take a minute to break it down a little bit. So when I interact with a brand, whether that's Peloton or Paramount Plus, They ask to collect my email address or my phone number in exchange for tailored marketing, targeted advertising, etc. So I input my email address, right? That's Samantha@thetradedesk.com. From there, they would then overlay the UID2 algorithm. And again, it can be within their ecosystem using our integrations from Snowflake, from Salesforce, whomever, or they can send it to the UID2 operator. And that ecosystem takes it and hashes it. It turns it into a binary large object, or a blob, which is really just a fancy way of saying a bunch of numbers and letters. From there, we then also salt it. So this is specific to UID2, but that's the A, B, C, D, E at the end. So it makes it this unique identifier present in this ecosystem. And then we encrypt it from there. So it adds another layer of security. And so when companies are using UID2s to talk to each other, they're not doing so by sending my email address back and forth, but they're in fact all the way down here at step 4, which is why it's such a secure ecosystem. And I did want to take a minute to talk a little bit about identity versus data. You know, I know Jeff touched on this a little bit, but an analogy that I've heard that I found really helpful is that of a safe deposit box. Identity is the identifier on the outside of the safe deposit box. It allows two companies, where I've given both of them my email address, to communicate about who I am. But it doesn't tell either of them anything about the contents of that safe deposit box. That is data, right? These companies may have the same UID2 on me, but they don't know that I'm a mom, that I live in Colorado, that I'm a dog owner. All of that, those are pieces of data. And so when we talk about UID2, it is truly just the sense of identity. It is not including any of those pieces of data. And we also add another layer. So we talked about kind of that token that's created at the end. We also allow companies to use double encryption protection. And what that means is the company takes their list of UID2s and adds another layer of encryption specific to themselves, and then transfers it to the end user, and that end entity has to receive the decryption key from that publisher. So it's another customer-specific level of encryption that's added, and the origination point of data has control over who receives those decryption keys. So there's all sorts of layers of protection and ability to control the receipt of that data as well as the creation of that data. And what we find is that it has been so widely adopted because it allows advertisers to still do the same things they need to optimize their business, right? They can use it for targeting, for measurement, for optimization, and best of all, it works across all channels. We've also made sure that UID2 is interoperable with other ID solutions. So we're not saying it has to be this or nothing else. You can leverage the accuracy and scale of UID2 in conjunction with everything else you're doing today. So it provides superior business results while also creating a better, more privacy-safe consumer experience. This is how we're going to get on that path towards the opt-in open internet. And what we've seen is that it generates incredible results. So Made In is a high-end cookware company. For me, again, cooking is putting ramen noodles in the microwave, so I wasn't familiar with them. But if you've eaten at Gramercy Tavern or Alinea in Chicago, your meal was prepared using their dishes. And they want to target at-home chefs, and as you can imagine, it's at a very high price point. So they looked to UID2 to understand how they could more effectively market to their customers. And what they found was that by connecting data more accurately, they saw a 22% increase in conversions. So people are more likely to buy because they're talking to the correct consumers. And they were more likely to convert more quickly, right? A 33% increase in conversions while spending less on their marketing dollars. So hugely beneficial for their business. This is just one example of many that we've seen across our advertisers. And it doesn't just benefit advertisers. We recently released a case study with Fubo, and they adopted UID2 in their platform. And what they found is they had a 62% increase in ad spend year over year. And the reason for this is because advertisers are willing to pay more when they know accurately who they're able to talk to. And they then see better results, just like we saw a 14% increase ROAS for these advertisers. But this is much bigger than any given campaign or even the trade desk. This is critical for the success of the open internet. The market needs to have access to data across all of these different ecosystems. We can't just silo the data and ask an advertiser to say, great, you're going to spend X dollars on this ecosystem and Y dollars there. I mean, imagine if a marketer only knew who I was on Facebook. they would have missed out on all of those touch points I talked about at the outset, and they wouldn't understand that they've already marketed to me in multiple areas, and they're going to continue sending me the same message over and over again. It's an inefficient way for them to use dollars, and candidly, it's a terrible consumer experience, which is why it's so important to have access to UID2 to work across these ecosystems and to be able to measure across all of these ecosystems. And as we've talked about, the success has been overwhelmingly positive. The thing that I am so proud of when we look at adoption is the array of types of companies that have adopted this. So Disney, early adopter of UID2. When we think about on the advertiser side, P&G recently announced their endorsement of it. We think about the infrastructure. You've got AWS, and you've got Snowflake, and you've got Salesforce. And we have numerous competitive DSPs also using this technology, because this is not a Trade Desk specific thing. This is the fabric of the open internet, and it's how we'll continue to connect the open internet together. But of course, we do not want to rest on our laurels. We are going to continue to focus on making sure that we activate this incredible demand that we've seen. And that's why we're so focused on making sure that nearly every advertiser is transacting on UID2 by the end of the year. So we've talked a lot about why it's important to have an accurate sense of identity. But of course, marketers also want to be able to overlay data when they are targeting those users. And that's why we've spent so much time improving the data marketplace. So, one of the biggest challenges that we have in the data marketplace is just the sheer volume, right? We've had such an archaic way of buying and overlaying data onto campaigns, and it's understandable. It's daunting. There are hundreds of thousands of segments from which to choose in the data marketplace. Imagine you guys had to decide if you want to invest in a company, and somebody said, great, there's 500,000 research papers available on this company. How are you going to pick which ones you're going to read? It wouldn't make sense from a cost-benefit perspective to read all of them. So you've got to have something for how you're making that selection. And what we found in the data marketplace is that advertisers were sometimes saying, well, this company was in talking to me last week. They had an awesome PowerPoint. I will invest my dollars there. Or they may say, yep, I recognize this brand name, therefore I'm going to pick that one. Or it could be size, right? I need to reach a lot of people and make sure it's really effective. I'm going to pick the segment that has the most people in it. Or maybe they're looking at price, like, ooh, this one costs a lot. It's got to be really good, right? Surely other people know what they're doing. You'll notice that none of those pieces are selecting based on the performance that's being delivered. And so that is where we have focused on driving change. By adding multi-element bidding, or the ability for advertisers to layer on data to the extent that it adds value and pay based on performance, we are now allowing advertisers to pick data that best delivers against the cause that they've identified for their campaign, rather than asking them to pick it out of a drop-down menu across hundreds of thousands of segments. And as Dave talked about, we've switched over to percentage of media pricing so that it's not cost prohibitive to apply data to your full campaign. Because what we were finding is before, on a CPM basis, many advertisers would want to use the same data across their campaign, but they just couldn't justify that cost on certain forms of media. And so we've right-sized that. And it's no surprise that the results have been so positive. What we've seen is, so we launched this in Audience Predictor in April, and what we've seen is there's a 150% increase in data elements being used. So advertisers are adding more data, and it's performing better, right? They've had a 22% increase in conversions. So it truly is that win-win ecosystem for advertisers, for data providers, and for consumers who are able to get more targeted, tailored messages. And of course, it wouldn't be a conversation about data if we didn't talk about shopper marketing, the latest buzzword. So everyone seems to have all sorts of different definitions for what it is, what it isn't. Shopper marketing is really just connecting with the consumer when they're ready to buy something. But as we all know, that has changed drastically, especially with COVID. So take my family, for example. We live near a super Target, and we buy everything there. We buy groceries there. You need backpacks for back to school time? Target has them. You need formal dresses for weddings? Target has them. You name it, we get it at Target. And what we used to do is we'd go Saturday morning and walk down the aisles, and we found all sorts of things we just couldn't imagine living without, thanks to the end cap displays or the middle of the aisle, advertisements for chips, whatever it may be. And that's how we filled up our cart. But with COVID, I joined the other 263 million Americans who shop online. And so it's no surprise that marketers will spend $100 billion on retail marketing next year, according to Group M. But as you can imagine, my trips to Target now look very different. So we frequently won't even go into the store. We'll pull in and do the curbside pickup, or I'll order something in the app and have it delivered to my home. And yet, the amount of money I have spent at Target has not gone down at all, much to the chagrin of my husband. And so, we are still making those purchases, but now I am influenced at very different points in my purchase cycle. Instead of waiting until I get to the store and walking through the aisles, my decision to buy something comes when I'm looking online, or when I hear an ad, or when I see something on TV. And so it's critical that marketers adapt their messaging to meet consumers in the moment where they are. So I want to bring this to life a little bit with an example I had recently. So I don't know about you guys. I am not a toothpaste loyalist. I used to go to the store and I would pick based on whichever had the shiniest box, or if this one was 3 times more effective and this other one was 5 times more effective. 5 is bigger than 3. That must mean that's better toothpaste. And that's why I picked it. And so now what I find is when I go to the Target app, I type in toothpaste. And even if they have the same Crest scope that's sitting on my bathroom counter, if it's on the 5th page of results, I'm never going to get there. And instead, to me, it doesn't matter if it's Crest, Colgate, Arm & Hammer. I'm going to pick whichever one is not the chalky white stuff and whichever is like the minty green that's the first one to come up. That is such a shift in how marketers need to advertise to consumers. And so it's because of that behavior, or because consumers are now looking at the For You coupon area, and that's how they're making their impulse purchases, that marketers need to be really smart about the messages they give, and they need to think about data in a whole new way. But what we found is that that retailers are in the perfect position to leverage UID2. They have a direct relationship with consumers. They are able to get their permission to use their data for targeted marketing, and they are then able to protect that data that they have gathered from the consumer using UID2, right? Their relationship with their customer is their crown jewel. They want to make sure that it's protected at all costs, and UID2 does that. But it allows them to leverage that signal to be able to make sure that they're marketing to them really effectively, and that they're allowing their partners, whether that's a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever, to also access that data and advertise to their customers as effectively as possible. So they're plugging in that data in a consistent way using UID2 across the ecosystem for both targeting and measurement. And what we found is that there is a huge amount of demand from retailers that want to be able to leverage this data both for themselves and for their partners across the ecosystem. And that's why we have such an incredible array of retailers available on our retail marketplace that David talked about. And we have hundreds of advertisers that have come to use this data. And it's not just the 80+% of CPG companies we work with or the major food and beverage brands that we have partnerships with, but it's all sorts of advertisers. So let me bring this to life for you with an example. Home Depot, for example, has great data on people that are coming into the store because they're buying all sorts of items if they've just moved homes. You could take another company like State Farm. They don't have any presence in a retail store, and yet that information around new home buyers is incredibly useful for them because they want to be able to market insurance to those entities or to those customers. And so it's not just CPG companies or food and beverage companies that are able to benefit from access to this data, but it's truly the hundreds and hundreds of advertisers on our platform that are finding utility in it. So whether they're coming in with their first-party data, whether they want to leverage data from retailers directly, or whether they want to use the more traditional third-party assets, the way that advertisers are able to gather the maximum amount of benefit is by keying it all off of UID2. So they've got a consistent sense of identity that they can leverage for their initiatives. And as you can imagine, we've seen incredible results. So BIC is a French company. They make everything from ballpoint pens to lighters. And recently, they ran a campaign for male and female razors. They wanted to understand how they were performing and how to optimize their campaign. So they used the data available from Walmart to understand who to target. And then they were able to measure on the back end to understand how it was performing and had nearly a 500% return on ad spend. So for every dollar they're spending to market, they get $5 in transactions. Now to put that into context a little bit, Nielsen says a strong campaign would be a 270% return on ad spend for this category. So that's nearly twice the performance that Nielsen sees as good. And the consistent presence is the ability to use UID2 to understand how to connect data for both targeting and measurement. With that said, I am so excited about all of the momentum that we have. We have seen incredible adoption of UID2. We're able to see it in a privacy-centric, consumer-first way that allows us to plug in across the ecosystem. Advertisers can then layer this with data that's now accessible to them and is able to help them achieve their campaign objectives while providing access to new types of data assets in the retail marketplace. And the thing that I am most excited about is that we are just getting started. The wind is truly at our backs, and it's going to be an incredible 2023. Thank you guys so much.
You can see why I'm so excited to work with Samantha and just all the progress. When I look at all those logos and I think about the infrastructure partnerships that we have, it's impossible not to be excited. It's a bit of a dream to actually have all those logos because I don't think we could have made up a better group of partners to have than what we have in UID2. So thank you again for all the work and amazing success. At our last Investor Day, Tim Sims was representing the inventory side of our business, and that's where he's grown up and spent